When the Emperor of Mankind faced his son, the arch-traitor Horus Lupercal, during the final hours of the Horus Heresy, the War Master, thanks to the blessings of the Chaos Gods and his father's own hesitation, would mortally wound the Master of Mankind before eventually being slain himself. In the aftermath of the battle, Rogel Dawn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, would bring the Emperor's broken, dying form back to Terra, before interring him into the life support systems of the Golden Throne. Eventually, the Emperor would lapse into a long and undisturbed silence, and would no longer be involved in the active governance of his Imperium. Confined within his throne room within the Imperial Palace, the Master of Mankind, now little more than a rotting carcass, barely able to contain the immense psychic power within, is watched over day and night by his loyal bodyguards, the golden-clad warriors of the Adeptus Custodes. The Emperor's dream of unifying all of humanity's worlds into a vast empire built upon the foundations of science, logic, and reason would be undone, as the Imperium devolved into a paranoid, superstitious, and highly religious entity, an entity that now collectively worships the Emperor as the one thing he so vehemently denied being, a god. Some believe that the Emperor will one day rise from his throne to proclaim judgment upon his people, while others, such as Thorian Inquisitors, believe that the Emperor can be resurrected, reincarnated, or even have his divine essence transferred into a new host body. But theoretically, what could happen if the Emperor did return to his Imperium to walk among mankind once more? For the purpose of this hypothesis, we will assume that the action of the Emperor leaving the confines of the Golden Throne will result in no immediate negative repercussions, such as the warp tear caused by the Thousand Suns Primarch, Magnus the Red, opening up once more. One possible event that may occur is that a war of faith could erupt throughout the Imperium. Should the Emperor be restored, many within the ecclesiarchy would hail the event as a miracle, the dawn of a new golden age. However, that being said, some potential fringe groups within the ecclesiarchy, or in greater likelihood the Inquisition, may argue that this cannot be the true Emperor, and fear that their fellows are being deceived by the powers of chaos. It has been shown that many members of the Inquisition are by their nature highly skeptical of any supposed miracles regarding the Emperor or his divinity. Katerina Greyfax of the Ordo Hereticus, for example, initially saw the living saint known as Celestine to be a heretical false idol that was quite possibly as a result of chaotic corruption and machinations. The Inquisitors' initial skepticism towards Celestine would eventually waver, however. Such a conflict could theoretically spread to all facets of the Imperium, potentially even including the Astra Militarum, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and even the Adeptus Astartes. Many such wars of faith have occurred within the past, the first of which pitting the Adeptus Ministorum against the organisation known as the Confederation of Light. These religious wars even grew in frequency and intensity during the Age of Redemption, which took place between M37 and M38. If a war of faith regarding the return of the Emperor were to occur, then the Emperor would more than likely personally intervene in order to cease such unnecessary strife as to not exhaust the Imperial military machine. The Emperor would seek to prevent events unfolding in a manner similar to those that happened following the Age of Redemption. This period was known as the Waning, and caused several planetary systems to fall to orc and chaotic incursion, due to the Imperium not having the manpower to defend them. Whether or not the Emperor would end this war of faith through diplomatic or militaristic means is unknown, and may indeed vary depending upon the specific situation at the time. Such a conflict would need to be quelled quickly, for if the Emperor were to return, then the forces of chaos would turn their attention to such an event. When the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Rebute Guilliman, returned from his death-like state, this attracted the attention of the Demon Primarchs and even the Chaos Gods themselves, throwing the warp into a tumultuous state. Some even claim that this event even resulted in the creation of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the warp rift that split the galaxy in two. Khorne, the Chaos God of bloodshed and violence, would even send 88 cohorts of his demonic minions, commanded by 8 bloodthirsters, to lay siege to the Imperial Palace upon Terra. As such, given how the Emperor is arguably one of, if not the greatest enemy of the Chaos Gods, then if the Master of Mankind returned, the Ruinous Powers would attempt something similar to what happened following Guilliman's return. This could even culminate in a potential third Siege of Terra, where demonic hordes and the remnants of the traitor legions, led by the Demon Primarchs, would march upon Terra in an attempt to destroy the Emperor before he consolidates his power. The success of such a siege, however, would depend on the strength of Imperial forces following a potential war of faith between believers and non-believers of the Emperor's return. Should the traitor legions unite in the common goal of slaying the Emperor, then this could even result in a situation where Abaddon the Despoiler, the current War Master of Chaos, ends up in single combat with either the Emperor or even Rebute Guilliman. It is worth noting, though, that the 9 traitor legions were unable to defeat the Loyalists in the Horus Heresy, so it is quite possible they would fail again if the Imperium was able to muster numbers equal to or greater than the 3 legions it had to hand originally, especially with the fact that the Emperor himself can now freely enter the fray. After such a conflict is dealt with, the Emperor could then turn his attentions towards the more bureaucratic aspects of the Imperium. In regards to the Ecclesiarchy, which is essentially the state church of the Imperium, the Emperor could react in one of 2 ways. The first reaction the Emperor could have is demanding that the Adeptus Ministorum be completely disbanded in the wake of his return. The Emperor was a known anti-theist, who during the time of the Great Crusade spread his own teachings known as the Imperial Truth, which was based on logic and science as opposed to the spiritualistic superstition that is seen and propagated within the modern-day Imperial cult. But at the same time, given the present state of affairs within the Imperium, the Emperor may allow the Ecclesiarchy to continue existing, at least for a period of time. The Emperor may come to the realization that an organization that fanatically worships him may indeed be a necessary evil, one that he may have no choice but to allow to exist, at least until the Imperium is stabilized and all threats pertaining to it are neutralized. While the Emperor may resume bearing the mantle of leadership that his status as Lord of Humanity provides, he will still require a regent, someone to rule in his stead when he is otherwise unavailable. To this end, it's quite likely that he may appoint his sole remaining loyal son, Rebute Guilliman, as effectively the Prince of the Imperium. Guilliman already is, in essence, the Emperor Regent, bearing the rank of Lord Commander of the Imperium and Supreme Military Commander of the Imperium's forces. While this rank may be more reminiscent of the older War Master rank, Guilliman may be better suited for serving the Emperor as a bureaucratic advisor, thanks to his logical and diplomatically focused mindset. Admittedly though, this role could still very well fall to the High Lords of Terror, depending upon the Emperor's need for Guilliman in other roles. A military council may be re-established, with representatives from all aspects of the Imperial war machine upon it. Such members could include the Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum, Lord Commander Militant of the Astra Militarum, High Abbess of the Adeptus Sororitas, Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, and Lord High Admiral of the Imperial Navy, with Rabute Guilliman serving as the representative of the Adeptus Astartes. This could even lead towards the Emperor reaching out in an attempt to establish diplomatic relations, or potentially even a fully fledged alliance with certain Xenos factions, to stand against a common enemy. The Inari in particular, a group of the Eldari who follow the god Iniad, are noted to maintain peaceful relations with the Imperium. This is due to not only their aid in resurrecting Rabute Guilliman after the Primarch was mortally wounded by Fulgrim following the Horus Heresy, but also for their aid in evacuating Imperial survivors from the world of Cadia during the 13th Black Crusade, and even fighting alongside Imperial forces against the Thousand Sons Legion and the Demon Primarch Magnus the Red. But one of the most drastic changes could theoretically be those to the Emperor's own character. Within the novel Dark Imperium, Guilliman notes that when he visited the Emperor following his own resurrection, he observes the following in the Emperor's evident change in personality.
The Emperor greeted Guilliman not as a father receives a son, but as a craftsman who rediscovers a favourite tool that he thought lost. He behaved like a prisoner locked in an iron cage who is past a rasp. Guilliman had no illusions. He was not the man who brought the rasp. He was the rasp. While the Emperor had walked aboard, he had cloaked his manipulations in love. He had let his Primarchs call him father. He had let them call themselves his sons. He had rarely spoken those words himself, Guilliman now realized, and when he had done so without sincerity. Buffeted by the full might of the Emperor's will, unclothed in flesh, a cloak had been ripped from Guilliman's eyes. The Emperor had allowed them to love him, and to believe he loved them in return. He had not. His Primarchs were weapons. That was all.
This could theoretically result in the Emperor adopting a more dictatorial mindset, reasoning that the only way to protect humanity from the threat of chaos, Xenos, and its own ignorance is to enforce a regime that could be quite possibly even more oppressive than the one currently employed by the Imperium. This in turn could also see the Emperor grant additional power to organizations such as the Inquisition, to hunt down and purge heretics who could be opposed to this new change within the Imperial government. Admittedly, to the common citizenry of the Imperium, such a change may be nearly imperceptible at best, and such a vast change within the Imperium's politics may be simply too impractical to implement across millions of worlds. Ultimately, however, such an action depends on the Emperor being of sound mind, and whether or not the Emperor's physical rejuvenation would also fix the damage done to his psyche and soul. It has been noted by several sources that the Emperor's soul has indeed fractured, barely being able to prevent itself from dissipating utterly. Within the novel Draco, the Emperor even admits that he is not just one mind, but is more a collection of separate identities, presumably the result of all the separate souls of Terra's ancient shamans merging into a singular being.
We are many, Inquisitor. How else could we administer our Imperium, or else winnow the warp? How else? Only tiny portions of us can hear you, or else we neglect our Imperium, of which our scrutiny cannot falter for an instant. For time does not halt within the realms of man. Indeed, time only halts for you.
The Inquisitor Jack Draco would also note that while the fractured pieces of the Emperor's psyche spoke to him, they would utter often contradictory statements. As such, if the Emperor returned, he could potentially suffer from a type of mental instability similar to multiple personality disorder. Each piece of the Emperor could theoretically attempt to control their mortal shell in order to achieve what they would consider to be the best course of action for their Imperium and humanity. This, as a result, could very well lead to conflicting and contradicting orders and decrees being made by the Master of Mankind, which could also lead towards a general weakening of Imperial infrastructure due to the confusion caused. This in turn could leave the Imperium open to numerous threats, be they the forces of chaos or Xenos such as the Necrons and Tyrannids. Whatever the case may be, the very idea of the Emperor returning seems extremely unlikely, and the question on what might happen seems to lead only to more questions. What do you think might happen if the Emperor returned? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.